So
Yes, it says live, and then I think you have to click on start webinar too.
yeah, it just it started it went, well, whatever.
All right. Hello, everyone, and welcome. We'll get started in a few seconds, but as always, feel free to introduce yourselves in the chat or in the comments if you're watching the LinkedIn live stream, and tell us where you're tuning in from today. It's always good to hear from you. And since it's our first live streamed webinar for 2022, if there's anything you're looking forward to this year, feel free to share that as well. All right, looks like we've got over 30 people here in the Zoom room. We've got some people on LinkedIn as well. So I'm going to go ahead and start us off officially. Hello and welcome. My name is Lishan Huang, Director of Design Content and Learning here at AIGA, the Professional Association for Design. As I mentioned earlier, this is our first live stream program of 2022. So welcome back. Thanks for sticking with us. And if this is your first AIGA event, welcome. This event, like all AIGA events, is member supported. So consider becoming a member at aiga.org. Also, a friendly reminder about our code of conduct. No harassment or abusive behavior will be allowed. We'll post a link in the comments if you want to refer to that, but it's basically be nice and be professional and we'll be A-okay. One Designer, One Work is the name of today's program. This is an ongoing monthly online series that features one designer presenting a piece of creative work that is personally meaningful to them. Today's guest presenter is Anna Karpinski. Anna is a graphic designer and illustrator from St. Louis, Missouri. She graduated from the Minneapolis College of Art and Design with a BFA in graphic design and a minor in art history. She currently works as an art director at Osborne Bar Paramore, where she focuses on Missouri tourism. I've never been to Missouri, so I'd love to learn more about that as well. And she's also president of AIGA St. Louis and a member of the National Design for Democracy Initiative and the National Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Initiative. She's helped to run the St. Louis Design Week and AIGA St. Louis's annual design show since 2019. So without further ado, I'll hand things over to Anna, and I'll come back and moderate the Q&A when she's done.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I am really excited to do this. It didn't occur to me until like a few minutes ago that this was the first one of the year. So no pressure, but I'm excited to do this. So I'm going to share my screen. Pardon me for like looking on the side. I'll try not to do that too often. So this is going to be pretty casual, just a little bit of a history about what it's like kind of growing up in a creative household. My parents are both super creative. I'll get into that, but it's proven to be an interesting journey, kind of a fun little ride. So we're going to start off with the artist that I promised that I would talk about, Charlie Harper. My parents are huge fans of them, so I grew up knowing about him, and I grew up learning so much about shape and color, and the simplification of objects and primarily animals really through him, and what that can look like. And I think that, you know, having that in an early age, seeing it in a more sophisticated form, I guess, than like a childhood drawing, was super fun. And it, you know, it made me start thinking in that way kind of automatically, which I think was really great. So these are all kind of images that I grew up knowing about and just like having around or like being aware of. And then because my dad is a graphic designer who had all the cool computer programs, I learned about Adobe Illustrator when it was Illustrator 9, which sounds wild to me, but they used to have, I don't know if anyone remembers this, but they used to have these tutorial like booklets or software, I guess, software that came in the disc that you could do, and it would give you like the files and it would give you a video, I think, or something to walk you through it. And my dad and I would learn how to use Illustrator together through this program, or through this tutorial. And it would, again, going back to all of the shapes, it would teach you how to make things with basic shapes, because obviously like that's kind of what Illustrator is about. And so once I kind of learned how to do that, I was working off of obviously very simple inspiration, I'm going to call it, as a kid. And, those worksheets, but instead of worksheets, I was using Charlie Harper. I was using, who I can't remember the name of right now, but the Hungry Caterpillar books as inspiration. And that was what I was using to base all of my illustrations off of. And that's how I was like continuing my education on learning beyond the tutorials. I have like distinct memories of there being a vase of flowers that you learned how to illustrate. And I know I illustrated a lot of ladybugs, because those are obviously all circles. So that was really easy for me to do as like a 10-year-old child. So, all of my illustrations as a kid looked like the top image. Basically, they were all just lots and lots of shapes in a digital form. I don't know if I did a lot of that by hand. Actually, I think this was all how I use. These are all used for like my illustration or Illustrator education. And the reason that I was so interested in this, and the reason I knew this program existed, and the reason I knew about Charlie Harper is because my parents, and by the way, the drawing of my father on the left is courtesy of me. Obviously, I was very talented. So my dad is a graphic designer. My mom is an illustrator, and they're both ended up being teachers as well. And so I grew up and they both worked from home too, which is like a whole nother thing, right? But it was constant creativity all the time. My mom, as many artists do, went through different creative phases throughout her career. And one of them was found object art. And I don't have any good pictures of her studio, but it's nuts. There are just every wall is just filled with thousands and thousands of things. To give you some perspective, she's selling some snow domes right now. And I asked her how many she had, because she just went through a purge of them like when I was in high school, and she currently has over 1,000 snow domes. So it was that kind of vibe. And I remember like being a kid and having to do dioramas for school and having to do anything. And it was like just going into a toy shop, going into my mom's studio, because she had little mini plastic soldiers. She had little mini trees and like flowers and all of everything you would ever need as a child to like create anything three-dimensional. And that was really cool. And that's how I grew up. And I grew up surrounded by artists like Seymour Schwartz and Pushpin Studio, Keith Haring. My parents have so much Marimekko everywhere. I know I'm going to pronounce it wrong. I apologize. Yayoi Kusama. I grew up with furniture, like knockoffs, obviously, because it's ridiculous how expensive, but like knockoff, Charles Eames, everything mid-century modern, Alva Alto. These are actually my parents' chairs. They just got refinished. That have been in my living room, or has been in their living room since I can remember. Also, as you can tell, I'm a cat person. This is great for if you have cats, because you can like poke your finger through the webbing and then your cats will like attack. And so they're multifunctional. I grew up with a lot of Fiesta ware in every color you can imagine. Their closet or their china cabinet basically looks like this. I wish I had a picture of their actual one, but. And so when I was in high school, like obviously I always wanted to do art. I was surrounded by it. It felt comfortable to me. It was exciting. It was really cool to see constant creativity all around me, but I didn't want to be my parents. I think like most kids want to be very opposite of their parents at this age. And so when I was in high school, I like went the other direction. I was trying to be photorealistic drawings, like, pen and ink, traditional kind of stuff. I was trying to kind of go dial all the way over to that side. And so that was most of what I was doing in high school, was a lot of like, realistic realistic kind of stuff. And then when I got into like later high school, I started revisiting Illustrator again, but I started again, like I kind of tipped the opposite direction. I was like, oh, wouldn't it be fun to see like how detailed, like what if I could do the posterization thing, but by hand? So I would find something to illustrate and I would go in by hand with the pen tool and like quote unquote hone my skills, I guess. And just like attempt to kind of, I felt like it was like an extension of my Illustrator education in a way, but it was also like still very different from what I had grown up around, like simple shapes, bold colors, or unrealistic kind of colors, sort of thing. And so I kind of tipped to that direction and was doing stuff like this for a couple years. And then I got into college and like I was all over the place, right? Like I was just doing pattern work. I like discovered the magic of doing things analog, and I was discovering just like how awesome it was to make mistakes and have that be part of your design. Like the book spread with the 1 and the 2 was something that I scanned in, and it scanned in like that, like real weird and distressed. And went to my teacher and I was like, I know this looks like I'm trying to be lazy and tell you that this was on purpose, even though it was a mistake, so I don't have to do more work. But I actually really love how it turned out. So I kind of want to turn this in as the final. And he was fine with that. And I think that that level of like messiness was really cool to kind of discover. And plus I went away for college. I grew up in St. Louis. My parents have lived in St. Louis their whole lives. So when I went away to college, it was kind of nice to be able to be surrounded by different types of creativity, and just kind of be able to learn about creativity from other perspectives than I had grown up with. So I was kind of all over the place. And I did a lot of sort of things. And then I came back and I was doing a little bit more illustration. I still do design work and stuff, but it seemed more fun to focus on illustration for this. And I couldn't find the exact piece, but my mom did we both did pieces for an auction for AIGA St. Louis. And I did the one on the right, the dogs and drafts, and my mom did something very similar to the one on the left. And when my co-organizer looked at the 2 pieces, he was like, oh wow, like mother like daughter. And I had this moment where I was like, oh no, I've gotten there. Like I came all the way around somehow, like by accident, like it was just inevitable somehow. Whatever the case may be, it just kind of happened that way. And I was like, damn, like, I don't know how I feel about this. But I've kind of like, as I've done more illustration work and as like I've started to have to do it for my current job and everything, like I feel like I've started just kind of tipping that way naturally, and it's just what I'm doing. So I've kind of learned to embrace it a little bit. So now we're back to simple shapes. And we're back to, like, I just finished the illustration on the left of our old courthouse here in St. Louis, like today, basically. But, you know, so I came back to the basics. I went back to all of my shapes. I went back to all of my simple illustrations. And I think it's a fascinating journey in the sense that I think that I grew up with a lot of creativity. I tried really hard to swing a different direction and to go somewhere else, but because I was so surrounded by this very specific type of aesthetic, I feel like I kind of tipped back into that. And I feel good about it now. I feel like there was probably a couple of years where I was struggling with that a little bit, where I didn't want to just be like my parents, or I didn't want to feel like my style was like iterative of them. I wanted it to feel original to me, and I wanted to feel like it was my own creativity. But it feels like somehow it got there, and it was actually making this presentation was fun because now that I look back at Charlie Harper, who honestly haven't really looked at in a while closely, it kind of feels like it came full circle a little bit. So Thank you. That's all I have. I just have a brief little story time for you about like a weird journey and what it was like growing up being creative. And I'm gonna stop sharing my screen and open it up.
Awesome. All right. I am popped back. So I'm having some camera issues here. Hopefully this will work. Give me a sec while I try to bring
You're fine.
myself back. All right. There we go. All right. Just dealing with some tech glitches for the very first live stream of the year. Anna, thanks so much for that presentation and that introduction to your story and to your work. I want to open it up to questions now to our audience. You can use the Q&A pod if you're here in Zoom, or if you're watching along on LinkedIn or any of our other live streams, you can just type in the comments. We are monitoring those as well. But in the meantime, I will ask Anna some questions myself, and then we'll bring in some audience questions. So the basic structure of your story was kind of how you came full circle and back home, starting with what you grew up with your parents and going away for college, and then kind of coming back to that convergence, I guess, with your mother's work. What are you thinking about? Like, what is the next chapter for you? Like, is this a comfortable place where you've kind of found yourself, or is there other areas or aesthetics that you want to explore with your work?
I think I've enjoyed kind of the simplification of my form. Like that's been, and it honestly didn't really occur to me that it was kind of basically what my parents do. For a while, like it just kind of hit me. It kind of just hits me every once in a while. And so that's where I feel comfortable in that, like, it doesn't feel like it's because of them. It just kind of has happened to go back that direction, and it feels really good. I think the other benefit of like seeing my parents be artists was, again, like I said this briefly, but my mom went through stages as an artist, right? Like artists go through different aesthetic kind of stages throughout their career as they're just trying different things or discovering themselves or developing and growing. And so I feel much more comfortable in the state of like, this is where I am now. This is what my style is now. It could change again. I have no idea. But being able to see that develop from like found object to now she does very like collage-y kind of stuff. You know, and now she's starting to learn about Procreate and doing things digitally, but they're still very shape-based. It's very similar, you know, and she's playing with color in ways that she hasn't before, you know. Being able to see that creativity and like that process has been really cool because it helps me to be more okay, I think, with like, this is where I am now. I don't know what I'm going to look like in the future. It's just going to kind of happen naturally, because that's how it felt like where I am now happened. So
awesome. All right, it looks like we have a few audience questions popped up in the chat and the Q&A now. We'll start with Heather. Heather has a comment for us. It's admirable that you respect your parents' work while not wanting to directly emulate it. The question part is, what would they say about your work today?
My mom seems a lot more excited about it than she was when I was doing she'll always say, she's a teacher, so she knows how to, you know, talk to people. But, you know, she'll always say like, I don't know if I like the style, but like, it looks good, you know. But now I feel like I'm getting a little bit more into, she's like, oh, it looks good. Like she doesn't have to have the caveat in a way of like, I don't know how I feel about the style, because it's a little bit closer to her. So in some ways, I think that like, it's exciting for them to see it come to this direction. But I also think they don't care, in the sense that they just like seeing that I'm creating and like seeing that I'm developing and like all of that kind of stuff. So they've never, I don't think, explicitly said like, I really like the style you're doing right now. It just feels like there's maybe a little bit more excitement because it's something they're familiar with.
Yeah. When you were telling your story, you were setting things up like, oh, in high school or college, you wanted to kind of swing away from what you had grown up with. And I kind of thought, oh, and then young Anna wanted to become an accountant or something. not creative based, which or not that being an accountant's not creative, but like in a different way, right? So that gets us to the
different
second
career. Yeah.
yeah second audience question. This one's from Michael B. Root, who wants to know, Anna, did you ever consider pursuing a career that wasn't creative, or did your upbringing make it feel like that was what you were predestined to do because of what your parents do?
I think there was a little bit of predestined kind of feel to a lot of it, but I also, like when I was little, like we all go through the careers we want. Like I wanted to be an archaeologist for a while until my parents were like, that means you have to dig through dirt, right? I wanted to be a journalist for a while. I thought that would be really cool. For a while, I thought about like doing art history as a career path. I have the worst memory in the world, so that felt pretty quickly like it wasn't going to happen. I've always been a lot more, I think, book nerdy than my parents have, where I'm a little bit more on the liberal arts side of things to some degree. So I think that's like a difference that we always had. And that's something that I've always kind of leaned into a little bit more with my stuff, like the research side and the psychological side and like all of that. So there were like other things I thought about, fashion designer at one point, but eventually I think in my head, I was like, oh, if I become a graphic designer, I can kind of do anything. Like that's such a broad title to me. I was
Right.
like, I can kind of fit whatever I want to do into that title. And it gave me more room to continue to like explore and develop and have like kind of the more academic side.
Right, because you could put graphics on textiles or on screens or on other surfaces in that sense, right? We have another question from Heather, who wants to know more about your involvement with AIGA through your long career. Could you tell our attendees about why you've taken on leadership roles at your local chapter and what you've gained from that experience as a leader in your local design community?
Yeah, so it's funny. So my dad is one of the founding members of the St. Louis chapter, and it used to be called Just Another Art Director, or Not Just Another Art Directors Club, which was like I think 8 or 9 people, my mom and my dad included, and then it became Doug Wolf. Talked to an AIGA National, made it an official AIGA chapter. So I'm a legacy AIGA-er, which is like weird. And my dad, when I graduated, he's like, you should join AIGA, join the board. It's a great networking opportunity. Like, obviously I'll help you, get in kind of thing, that ended up not being like an issue really. And I joined as student conference chair, and it just kind of grabbed me and I just kept going and kept going. And then when the issue of presidency came up, it was, at first I was like, oh, I'm like way too young. I am super unqualified for this. And then it just kind of happened. And then I was like, okay, here I am. And it's been amazing. It's been like an incredible kind of learning experience. And I just got my job at Osborne Bar like in August. And so when I was job hunting, having to like rewrite my resume and like look through my portfolio and like reflect on my experience and what I've been doing creatively, it didn't even occur to me how much AIGA had impacted that. And that was really cool to see. Like it was more of an impact in like the leadership and the organization in that kind of way in the process versus like actually creating things. But I've found that to be like more valuable than I really honestly expected it to be. So that's been really cool, but it was, again, kind of a weird journey. A little bit.
Yeah, it's
again,
sort of like the predestination thing again, right? I love the like intergenerational aspect of all of that.
Yeah, a little bit.
So another question about how you grew up. Christy over at our LinkedIn feed wants to know, how did your parents balance work time and parent time when they were working from home? Because that was, I guess, back in the day before everyone or most of us were forced to work from home. So as like early pioneers of that and as parents, how did they deal with that?
I think it was pretty easy in the sense that because they worked in home and like they had their own studios, it just kind of felt like my mom taught, so she was the one that was like a way more maybe, but they were freelancers, so as we know, like you kind of set your own schedule in a way, so it didn't feel like, I don't know. I don't know what it's like to not have parents that don't work from home, but I mean, I was at school most of the time. I guess during the summer, like there were a lot of times like we would watch TV and my mom would like work on an illustration, or I would go up to her studio and I would get to see stuff. And like that was kind of cool to always have all that around. There's like a video of me somewhere that's never gonna make it to the internet. That's like I have like a video recorder and I'm trying to like do a documentary of my parents, and they're like dealing with a computer issue and they are not in, like they are like, hey, why don't we put that down? Like, why don't we just not? Because they're trying to work and like I don't understand it. I just want to like play, right? But they're so it's just like stuff like that. But it was really just the environment of just constantly being surrounded by like all these weird imagery, all these weird graphics everywhere, I think.
Very cool. So let's see, there's so many audience questions. I'm trying to curate the next one. All right, let's go here into the chat. All right, Laura wants to know, did you always plan to return to St. Louis after going to college in Minneapolis, or did you consider working in Minneapolis for a while?
It's funny. When I graduated, I was so intimidated. This is like imposter syndrome. I was so intimidated by Minneapolis studios and the market, how competitive it was. And I was so stressed about getting a job. And part of the reason I think I moved back to St. Louis was that comfort of like, it's still competitive, but it's not quite as competitive. And it felt like an easier place to start, and it felt more familiar to me. So in a lot of ways, I think I came back in part because of that. And I also I did kind of start missing St. Louis. I think I was starting to miss being around my family. I was starting to miss how quiet sometimes St. Louis can be. And it was sort of growing at that point. It's grown even more, but, so I didn't mind coming back, but then I got, someone in Minneapolis reached out to me like 3 months after I moved back. And I was like, damn, I should have gone for it, right? Like I should have done it. So lesson learned, I guess.
Totally. It's like you become more valuable sometimes right after you move away.
Right. I was like, you couldn't have sent me this email 3 months ago, but okay.
So we have a couple of questions that I'll batch together because I think they have to do with how you sustain your creative energy. So the first one is, you're juggling many hats, especially now during a pandemic. How do you deal with creative burnout? And then the second question is, have you ever felt like you lost your creativity, and how do you invigorate it?
Yeah, so I feel like I'm experiencing creative burnout right now. So great question. So over the pandemic years now multiplied, I found that doing creative things that are directly related to what I do at my day job don't really work. I struggle because I've been doing it all day and I don't have any more creative juice for making an illustration or doing a design thing. So I started doing like hobby photography stuff, and that's been super fun because it's still creative. It still gets that kind of part of my brain like satisfied, but it's so different from what I do. I don't feel the pressure of having it be good or worried about showing it, because that's like what I do in my daily life. I also like color a lot. I think that coloring's really relaxing. Like I'll get like something super detailed and I'll just like go at it for like hours. And I think that that's really fun. And also reading, because I feel like that feels, again, it's creative kind of, but I don't have to think about it, which is kind of nice. And I get to like enjoy someone else's creativity. So those are the things I've been doing. Sometimes if I don't feel creative, I just don't do anything creative for a while, and that kind of helps me, because then I'll start getting an itch again, and then that'll motivate me to like be creative in some way. But if I'm out of it, I'm done. Like I gotta step away for a while.
Awesome. So another related question to your craft and your creativity. This is an anonymous question. Earlier, you were talking about having experimented with many different styles. Do you feel like it took you a while to hone your craft, or to get to a point where you felt like it was more like you or authentically you?
I think so. And I still, it's funny because I still don't know if I'm 100% me yet. Like, because so I did a lot of my old job was I worked at an architecture firm that does a lot of like guest experience spaces like theme parks, museums, zoos, aquariums. Like that kind of work is very different from like what we traditionally think of as illustration and design. So a lot of the stuff I was doing that honestly wasn't my style at all. It was, a theme park aesthetic, which is very different. So I didn't have a lot of chance to like develop my own style to some degree, and I was doing it in freelance work or personal projects and stuff. And I think over the last couple of years, it's just kind of naturally started to fall more into the shape realm, like real bold outlines, simplified forms, and it feels comfortable right now, and it feels like that's something I'm very familiar with. So I guess right now it's my style, but I don't think at any point I was like, okay, my style is going to be this. I think it just kind of started, like all of the shading like started disappearing, and then all of like the little wiggly nuance lines started straightening. Like it just kind of happened.
Yeah, it's sort of like there's an additive dimension and a subtractive dimension, right? So there's like the additive of you're trying different things, or because of work, you have to stretch yourself to do the house style of the amusement park. And then there's that gradual evolution of, as you said, like taking away the shading or focusing on a more minimal color palette and all of those things like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Michaela wants to know, has transitioning to art direction changed the way that you approach projects and design ideation?
Not a little bit, because I'm thinking about campaigns on a larger scale. So, and I'm working with a copywriter for the first time, I think, professionally. And so there has been a little bit of like a adjustment for me in that way of like thinking about things in like this much larger subset, as opposed to, again, like thinking about one amusement park ride or one museum exhibit. You're thinking about an entire campaign that's going to last for a long time, and that has to continue to create content. I do think though that like being the president of AIGA has helped with that. So it has not been like a hard transition, because I was kind of already doing that to some degree, and I was already sort of thinking about big picture and having to creative direct or art direct my comms team, and coming up with like ways in which we can create content. So there's a little bit of that. There's a little bit of like getting used to like this new structure, but at the same time, I feel like the leadership skills, which are maybe the biggest shift from and creating new ideas, which is maybe the biggest shift from like graphic design to art direction, were already kind of there in some ways, or had already started to develop.
Yeah, I think it's interesting when you look back and you were saying you were kind of already doing art direction all along as president of AIGA St. Louis. And sometimes you're already developing those skills or doing those tasks before you get the official title professionally, right? And like connecting the dots, I think, is a way of thinking about it.
Yeah, I kind of felt under and overqualified for everything, because my day job was so weird that it's very like niche. But the AIGA stuff was very much like all of that kind of leadership and directional kind of big picture stuff. So I felt like I had a lot of assets there, but then I felt like hadn't worked in digital a whole lot. So that kind of limits you a little bit when you're looking for jobs now. So it was like a weird space to be in.
So the art pieces that are behind you on the wall, are any of those your own work? And would you like to tell us more about one of them?
I don't hang my own work. Okay. I don't like looking at it, because every time I look at it, I'm like, all my work is like rolled up in posters. These are all prints that my parents have gotten me, I think. Except for, so let's see if I can, oh my God, I'm so close. Okay, that one, the bright green one, is by Micah Smith, who's an artist who we had speak. Actually, he was the last person to speak before the pandemic. He did custom posters, St. Louis specific screen prints for his event. And so that is one of those. The one right below it is from, I gotta remember their name because I can't remember off the top of my head, but it's by a Minneapolis screen printing shop that we toured when I was in college. And they had no education in screen printing or print, and they just kind of trial by error everything, and they have some really awesome stuff just through their mistakes. The the kind of like cardboardy poster right there is a type specimen poster from House Industries. And then this is a series of postcards from one of our local firms, Brand Almanac, that they had like a cool lunar eclipse party when that happened like a few years ago. This is my parents actually did it together for an art auction. It's paper collage houses. They said they're never working together again. So you can tell very clearly which ones are my mom's and which ones are my dad's, because they have very different design aesthetics. But yeah. Yeah, lots
Awesome.
of random stuff up there.
Yeah, thanks for sharing a little bit about your environment. I just wanted to make a quick announcement, and then I have another question coming in from LinkedIn. But my colleague Susan posted in the chat here in Zoom, and I posted on LinkedIn, if you are interested and inspired by Anna's story about getting involved in your own local chapter, we posted a link there so you can learn more on aiga.org. Sophia over at LinkedIn wants to know, what books are you currently reading, Anna?
So I'm currently reading Mr. Norrell and Jonathan Strange. What's it, Dr. Strange? Jonathan Strange, which is a book about two early 19th century magicians that are fighting. Yes, thank you. Are fighting as part of the Neapolitan. Oh my God, my brain. Yeah, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell. Thank you. They're fighting in a war, and it's kind of about the resurrection of magicians in London. It's really cool. It reads like a snarky autobiography or biography. It's 1,000 pages, so I'm never gonna finish it, but highly recommend Cloud Cuckoo Land by Anthony Doerr. That's my favorite book of 2021. It's a love letter to the importance of literature and to storytelling, and how we hold that dear and how we protect it so that it lives throughout multiple generations.
Awesome.
Yeah, that's
wonderful.
Napoleonic Wars. Thank you. I was like, I couldn't remember the end of that. I was like Napoleon something, but I couldn't remember if it was Napoleonic or I don't know. My brain was like freaking out. Thank you.
Looks like Susan's posted those in the chat as well. I'll post those over to LinkedIn so folks can see it over there. So Anna, are there any other local St. Louis creatives, whether they're designers or work in other media, that you want to shout out right now to let the world know about?
Yeah, so my previous vice president, Javen Solomon, has been doing really awesome things. He's a muralist now. He used to work at my old company, actually, which is kind of funny, but he's now a muralist. He started a really awesome project at the end of 2019 and into 2020 for supporting Black artists who would do murals kind of across St. Louis, and that got a lot of attention. It was really cool. It's called Painted Black STL. I don't know if they're still doing stuff right now. Obviously, the pandemic kind of puts everything, makes everything a little weird. And then, oh man, I'm like blanking. Shreyas. Oh man, I'm gonna look up her name because I do not know how to spell it. Let's see if this is right. Shreyas is a comic book artist, illustrator, and teacher at WashU, and she's put in the chat her website. She's really awesome. She just did an anthology with a bunch of other comic book artists. And those are the two off of the top. I have like a million, but those are like the two like right off the top of my head that I always tell people about and I always recommend people look up. But St. Louis honestly has like a really strong design community, but also artistic community. And it's super awesome to kind of watch that develop and grow and see kind of artists of color also like kind of make a little bit more of a splash than maybe in the past. I know St. Louis is a little like, we got some problems, but there's some really cool ones out there.
Yeah, thanks for those shout outs to your fellow St. Louis creatives. So to wrap up, Anna, do you have any final words that you want to share with our audience today?
Thanks for having me. I'm really excited that I got to share my story. I think you had really good questions too. Yeah, I'm happy I was the first one of 2022. Can't believe it's already that time.
Yeah, well, thanks for kicking off our year with our programming. We do One Designer, One Work once a month here at AIGA. So if you're not on our email list, you can sign up for that as well on aiga.org. Thanks to all of our audience members. It looks like we had folks from all over the US as usual, but we also had Austria, we had India, we had Paris, France. So that's awesome. It's great to see this international audience continue and to continue to support us and our community. So thanks again, Anna. Thanks again, everybody. See you at the next one. I'm Lishan Huang. Bye.